Anybody can print a seal, Officer Brent Keller said, lifting the thick envelope beneath the white station lights. Before Camille Brooks could finish her warning, he tore across the stamped edge. The sound was small, almost ordinary, but every muscle in Camille's body went still. A red federal seal split beneath his fingers, and 2 folded pages slipped onto the intake counter. Camille did not grab for them. She looked at the digital clock above the security door. 6:42 in the evening. Then she looked directly at Sergeant Paul Harlan. At 6:42, your officer broke a monitored federal seal. Harlan gave a tired smile, the kind reserved for someone he had already decided did not belong in his station. Nobody outside this building knows you are here. Inside Camille's coat pocket, her phone vibrated once. The signal had already gone out. Subscribe and stay with this story, because the document they mocked was not meant for a suspect outside the station, and the truth inside it was about to change who controlled every door in the building. The North Harbor Police Station smelled of old coffee, printer toner, and rain carried in from the street. Camille stood alone at the intake counter wearing a charcoal coat over a simple blouse, her leather work bag resting against one leg. She had introduced herself clearly, presented federal identification, and requested the evidence custodian by name. Harlan had barely glanced at the card. Keller had laughed at the sealed envelope. Officer Ethan Cole, the youngest man behind the counter, had said nothing. His eyes remained fixed on the torn paper. "Do not touch another page," Camille said. Her voice was calm, but it traveled through the quiet lobby. Keller raised one fragment by the corner. "You come in here after hours with paperwork anyone could make at a copy shop, and now you are giving instructions. I am describing what the law requires after protected material has been compromised." Harlan stepped closer. He was a broad white man in his late 40s, with silver beginning at his temples and the controlled posture of someone accustomed to ending conversations. "The law in this building goes through me." Camille looked toward the ceiling camera above the intake desk. Its indicator light was dark. She looked at the camera near the hallway. Dark again. "Turn on the recording system," she said. Harlan's expression hardened. "You do not have authority here." "Then call the federal court clerk whose number is printed on the verification card." Keller unfolded the top page. Camille saw only a narrow line of text before he covered it with his hand. "Premises to be searched." Ethan saw it too. His face changed, but Harlan did not notice. "Give me your phone," Harlan said. "No, you entered a secured police facility with unverified documents." "I entered a public intake area with a court-sealed delivery and requested a signed receipt." Harlan glanced at Keller. "Secure the material." Keller gathered the loose pages carelessly, pressing the torn seal beneath his palm. Camille tracked every piece without moving her head. One fragment near the keyboard. 2 pages under Keller's hand. A corner of the envelope on the floor beside Ethan's shoe. Chain of custody depended on memory when systems failed, and Camille had trained herself never to let stress blur detail. "Every choice made after the seal broke becomes part of the warrant," she said. Harlan gave a short laugh. "You keep using that word like it scares us." Camille met his eyes. "It should make you careful." Behind him, Ethan slowly lowered his gaze to the fragment near his shoe. Printed beneath the court heading were 6 words that made his breathing stop: North Harbor Police Station Evidence Division. He bent as if adjusting his boot and covered the fragment with one hand before Keller could reach it. Harlan pointed toward the interview hallway. "Take her phone and place her in room 2 while we verify who she is." Camille remained still. "Call Inspector Raymond Price. We will decide who gets called." The alert already did. For the first time, Harlan's smile disappeared. Somewhere beyond the front doors, tires rolled slowly across wet pavement. Camille heard more than one engine. Then all of them stopped at once. Camille heard a car door close beyond the rain-streaked windows, but Harlan moved before anyone outside could enter. He stepped between her and the lobby, then pointed toward the interview hallway. "Room 2. Now." Keller reached for her phone, and Camille drew her hand back without raising her voice. "That device contains protected federal communications. You may preserve it in my presence, but you may not search it without authorization." Harlan studied her face as though calmness itself were suspicious. He had expected anger, fear, or confusion. Camille gave him none of those things. She had spent 15 years examining evidence systems for courts, public defenders, and federal oversight teams. She knew how quickly a missing signature could bury a case and how easily one altered time stamp could turn truth into doubt. 3 months earlier, Inspector Raymond Price had asked her to compare North Harbor's evidence records with federal case files. The assignment appeared routine at first. She worked from a secure office 40 miles away, reviewing barcode scans, storage logs, and transfer receipts. Then patterns emerged. Property connected to cases involving black defendants was marked as transferred when no receiving agency had signed for it. Body camera files disappeared minutes before internal review requests. Evidence bags were listed under 2 different numbers, while access records showed the same officers entering the storage room after midnight. Camille checked every possibility before drawing a conclusion. Clerical error. Outdated software. Duplicate entries. None explained why the same names appeared again and again. Sergeant Paul Harlan approved the corrections. Officer Brent Keller signed many of the disputed transfers. The final step required a sealed federal order authorizing investigators to secure the building, isolate the servers, and examine the evidence division before records could be changed. Camille had not come to arrest anyone. She had come quietly because quiet work often protected more truth than a public warning. She needed only a signed receipt from the evidence custodian and confirmation that the storage system remained untouched until the federal team arrived. Instead, Harlan had dismissed her identification before reading it. Keller had torn the seal. Now they were creating a new record with every decision. Ethan Cole followed several feet behind as Camille walked toward room 2. He kept one hand closed around the fragment he had lifted from the floor. His breathing sounded shallow in the narrow hallway. Harlan opened the interview room and gestured toward the metal chair. "Sit down." Camille entered but remained standing beside the table. The room was small, cold, and nearly empty. A camera sat above the one-way glass, its indicator light dark like the others. "State your full name," Harlan said. "Camille Denise Brooks." "Employer." "That information is printed on the identification card you refused to verify." Keller placed her card on the table. "It says consultant. That does not make you federal law enforcement." "I never said it did." "Then you have no reason to bring a warrant into my station." Camille looked at him carefully. "You still believe the warrant was brought here for delivery?" Harlan's eyes narrowed. For 1 second, the room became silent except for rain tapping against a vent near the ceiling. Keller glanced toward his supervisor, waiting for an explanation that did not come. Camille continued, "Preserve the envelope, every page, every fragment, the intake counter, and all digital records from 6:30 this evening forward." Harlan leaned closer to the table. "You are not directing this investigation." "No," Camille said. "I am documenting the moment you stopped cooperating with it." In the hallway, Ethan unfolded his hand and read the fragment again. The words were incomplete, but the address was visible. 114 Harbor Avenue. The exact address beneath his badge. He looked toward the lobby, where the torn pages remained on the counter, then toward the evidence corridor, where Keller had ordered the evening clerk to prepare the shred bin. Ethan's expression tightened. He walked quickly to the wall panel and activated his body camera manually. A small red light appeared on his chest. Harlan opened the interview room door. "Cole, turn that off." Ethan stood still. "Sergeant, I think we need to call the captain." "I gave you an order." "And I saw the address on the warrant." No one spoke. Outside, another car door closed, then another. Blue-white headlights filled the lobby windows without flashing. Camille finally sat down, folded her hands on the table, and listened as the station's front entrance opened. The station's front doors opened, but no one rushed inside. 2 men in dark raincoats entered first, scanned the lobby, and stepped aside. Behind them came Deputy United States Marshal Elena Ruiz, a composed woman in her 40s carrying a leather folder beneath one arm. She did not raise her voice or display urgency. She simply looked at the torn pages on the intake counter, the dark security cameras, and Sergeant Harlan standing in the interview hallway. "Nobody touches anything," she said. The sentence was quiet, but every officer in the lobby stopped moving. Ethan's body camera continued recording. Keller remained near the counter with one hand resting beside the damaged envelope. Harlan walked forward, forcing confidence into his posture. This woman entered with unverified documents and disrupted station operations. Ruiz looked past him toward Camille, who was still seated inside room 2. Was the seal intact when she arrived? Harlan hesitated. Keller answered first. We had reason to believe it was not authentic. That was not my question. The room cooled around them. Ethan stepped closer to the lobby. The seal was intact, he said. Harlan turned sharply. Officer Cole. Ethan swallowed but continued. I saw Officer Keller tear it at the counter. Ruiz opened her folder and removed a photograph showing the original envelope, its serial number, and the exact pattern of the federal seal. She compared it with the torn material without touching either item. This delivery was logged at 6:12 this evening, she said. The seal transmitted a compromise alert at 6:42. Harlan's face tightened. You are saying the envelope was electronically monitored? I am saying your station received a protected court instrument, broke the seal, detained the authorized courier, and interrupted a federal preservation order. Keller stared at the paper in front of him as if it had changed shape. Ruiz turned toward one of the marshals. Secure the entrances. Isolate the local network. Preserve every camera, access log, phone record, and document produced after 6:30. Harlan stepped forward. You cannot lock down my station based on her accusation. Ruiz met his eyes. This lockdown is not based on her accusation. She opened the folder to a second page. It is based on the order your officer tore apart. The words struck the lobby harder than any raised voice could have. Camille watched through the open interview room door. She had expected resistance, but not this much carelessness. For 3 months, she had studied the way North Harbor erased mistakes. A body camera file disappeared after a complaint. A narcotics envelope changed weight between intake and court. A cash seizure lost 2 signatures and gained a new barcode. Each irregularity looked small by itself. Together, they formed a system. Harlan had treated every missing record as an inconvenience rather than evidence. He had trusted the station walls to protect him from outside scrutiny. Ruiz walked toward room 2 and stopped at the threshold. Dr. Brooks, are you injured? No. Was your phone taken? They attempted to take it. It remains in my coat pocket. Ruiz nodded. Keep it there until the device can be documented. Harlan gave a bitter laugh from the hallway. Doctor. She told us she was a consultant. Camille stood slowly. Both statements are true. Keller looked at her identification card again and noticed the letters after her name. Doctor of Information Systems. Federal Judicial Records Specialist. The information had been visible from the beginning. He simply had not considered it important. Ruiz asked Camille to describe the condition of the envelope at arrival. Camille answered with precision. The outer seal was intact. The tracking strip showed green. Officer Keller lifted it from the counter with his right hand. Sergeant Harlan declined verification. The seal was torn at 6:42. 2 pages fell forward. One fragment landed near the keyboard. Another fell beside Officer Cole's left shoe. Ethan opened his hand and displayed the folded fragment. I preserved this. Ruiz looked at him. Place it on the clean evidence sheet and state where you found it. Harlan's expression darkened. Cole, you are making this station look guilty. Ethan looked down at the fragment, then back at his supervisor. No, Sergeant. The record will show what happened. From the evidence corridor came the sudden mechanical hum of a machine starting. Camille turned toward the sound. Keller's face lost its color. Ruiz raised one hand, and the entire lobby became still. What machine is that? She asked. No one answered. Then Camille heard paper feeding through metal rollers somewhere behind the locked evidence door. Ruiz turned toward the evidence corridor as the machine continued to hum. Who authorized that equipment? She asked. Keller looked at Harlan before answering, and that single glance told Camille more than his words could have. "It is only the document shredder," he said. "Routine disposal." Ruiz did not move. "Nothing in this building is routine now." Ethan stepped toward the locked evidence door. Sergeant Harlan told the evening clerk to clear unauthorized material before the federal team arrived. Harlan's jaw tightened. "I told him to secure paperwork that had not been verified." Camille came out of room 2 and stopped several feet from the counter. She kept her hands visible and her voice level. "Turn off the shredder. Do not remove the waste bin. Do not open the machine housing. Do not touch the remaining pages." Harlan stared at her. "You are still not in charge here. I am trying to keep your decisions from becoming worse." For the first time, the anger on his face carried something underneath it. Fear. He had believed the envelope was a prop carried by a black woman who expected a uniform to make room for her. Now federal marshals stood beneath the dark cameras, and every careless choice had become part of a record he no longer controlled. Harlan pointed toward Camille. "She is interfering with station operations." Ruiz answered without looking away from the corridor. "The station is under a federal preservation order. Operations are suspended except for emergency response." The shredder kept running. Camille listened closely. The sound rose, paused, then caught again. Someone behind the locked door was still feeding paper into it. "The clerk may not know the order has changed," she said. "Call him without opening the door." Ruiz nodded to one of the marshals, who used the wall phone beside the corridor. No answer. Ethan moved toward the access panel. Harlan blocked him. "You do not enter that room without my approval." Ethan looked at the dark camera above them, then at the red light on his own body camera. "Your approval is part of what they are investigating." Harlan's face hardened. "You are choosing a stranger over your unit." Camille felt the words settle over the lobby. She had heard versions of them before. Loyalty was often used as a softer name for silence. Ethan did not answer immediately. His hand hovered near the access card clipped to his belt. "I am choosing the record," he said. Ruiz stepped between them. "Officer Cole, open the door and remain at the threshold. No one enters until the area is photographed." Ethan scanned his card. The lock released with a dull click. Warm air drifted from the corridor, carrying the smell of heated paper and dust. At the far end, an older clerk stood beside the shredder holding a stack of intake forms. He froze when he saw the marshals. "Step away from the machine," Ruiz called. The clerk placed the papers on a metal cart and raised both hands slightly. Ethan reached the power switch and stopped the shredder. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise. Camille could hear rain against the front windows again. Ruiz ordered photographs of the machine, the cart, the floor, and the waste bin. She asked the clerk who had given the instruction. His eyes moved toward Harlan. "Sergeant said to clear anything that did not belong in the system before the inspection." Harlan shook his head. "That is not what I said." Keller spoke quickly. "He meant duplicate forms." Camille looked at the stack on the cart. The top page carried the same barcode pattern she had reviewed for months. It belonged to an evidence transfer that had never reached the county laboratory. She did not touch it. "That form is listed as missing in the federal audit," she said. Ruiz looked at Harlan. "How did a missing record reach a shred cart tonight?" He had no answer. Camille turned to Ethan. "Preserve the cart exactly as it is." Harlan gave a short, bitter laugh. "You think this proves a conspiracy?" Camille met his eyes. "No. I think it proves why the warrant named this building." Keller stepped backward from the counter. Beneath his palm, one torn page shifted, revealing a line he had not seen before. "Authorized search includes evidence storage, administrative offices, digital systems, and personnel access records." His fingers lifted away as though the paper had become hot. Ruiz saw the line and closed her folder. Nobody leaves. Nobody deletes anything. Nobody makes another call without logging it. Then she looked toward the station doors as a second federal team entered carrying sealed evidence cases. Harlan finally understood that Camille had not come to threaten his authority. She had arrived carrying the last warning he would ever receive before that authority was taken out of his hands. The second federal team moved through the lobby without hurry, placing numbered markers beside the torn envelope, the loose pages, and every object that had been touched since Camille arrived. No one spoke above a normal tone, yet the station seemed to shrink around Harlan. The authority he had carried so comfortably now belonged to procedures he could not interrupt. Ruiz assigned one marshal to the evidence corridor and another to the communications desk. She ordered the building access logs preserved, the network disconnected from outside control, and every officer present identified by full name and duty status. Camille stood near the intake counter, watching the pieces of the warrant without touching them. One corner remained beside the keyboard. Another rested on the clean evidence sheet Ethan had prepared. Keller had folded one page carelessly, leaving a deep crease across the court seal. Each damaged fragment represented a choice, and every choice now had a witness. Captain Judith Crane arrived less than 10 minutes later, still wearing a raincoat over her uniform. She stopped just inside the entrance when she saw the federal evidence cases. "What happened?" she asked. Harlan answered immediately. An unauthorized civilian brought suspicious documents into the station and created a disruption. Ruiz turned toward Ethan. "Officer Cole, state what you observed." Ethan's mouth tightened. He looked at Harlan, then at Camille. Dr. Brooks entered the public intake area and requested the evidence custodian. She presented identification and a sealed envelope. Sergeant Harlan declined verification. Officer Keller tore the seal. The station cameras appeared inactive. Sergeant Harlan later ordered material cleared before inspection. Harlan interrupted. "That is a dishonest summary." "Let him finish," Crane said. Ethan continued, "I found a warrant fragment on the floor. It named this station as the premises to be searched. I activated my body camera. Sergeant Harlan ordered me to turn it off. I refused." Crane looked at the red light on Ethan's chest, then toward the dark ceiling cameras. "Why were the lobby cameras disabled?" Harlan's answer came too slowly. "Scheduled maintenance." Camille spoke for the first time since the captain entered. "The maintenance records will show whether that is true." Crane studied her. "Who exactly are you?" "Camille Brooks. Judicial data auditor under contract with the Federal Inspector's Office." "And why were you sent alone?" "Because my task was to confirm custody records, not conduct the search." The team was already staged nearby. Harlan gave a humorless laugh. "So this was a trap?" Camille met his eyes. "No. The sealed order was an opportunity to cooperate before the search began." Ruiz placed a copy of the verification photograph in front of Crane. The envelope was tracked from federal court. The compromise alert was automatic. "We arrived because the seal was broken without a receiving code." Crane looked at Keller. "Did you tear it?" Keller glanced toward Harlan. "I believed it was fraudulent." "Did you verify that belief?" Sergeant Harlan said the identification looked questionable. Camille felt the old familiarity of the excuse. Her credentials had not changed. Only their willingness to read them had. Crane picked up Camille's identification card by the edges and examined it carefully. "This is valid." Keller said nothing. Ruiz instructed a marshal to document Camille's coat pocket before she removed her phone. When the device was placed on a clean surface, its screen showed the alert history. Delivery received by courier. Seal compromised. Preservation response activated. The time stamps matched Camille's account to the minute. Crane's expression changed as she read them. "Sergeant Harlan, step away from the intake area." Harlan remained still. "Captain, you are letting federal officers take over this building because of one woman's story." Camille answered before Crane could. "Not my story. The record." The distinction settled over the room. Ruiz opened a secure tablet and displayed the audit summary. Missing video files. Altered transfer times. Duplicate evidence numbers. Repeated after-hours access under Harlan's credentials. Crane stared at the list, then toward the evidence corridor where the shredder stood silent. "How long has this been happening?" she asked. Camille did not soften the truth. "Long enough that people may have lost cases, jobs, and years of their lives because evidence could not be trusted." Ethan lowered his eyes. Keller gripped the edge of the counter. Harlan looked toward the rear exit, but a marshal was already stationed there. Ruiz closed the tablet. From this moment forward, all station authority over evidence systems is suspended pending federal review. Then she faced Harlan and Keller. You will surrender your access cards and remain available for recorded interviews. Harlan finally understood that the broken seal was not the beginning of the investigation. It was the moment he had placed himself inside it. Camille returned to room 2 while the marshals documented the lobby, and for the first time since entering the station, Northwest 1 followed close enough to control where she stood. The door remained open. The overhead light cast a pale rectangle across the metal table, and rain whispered through the ventilation grate near the ceiling. Outside, voices had softened into names, times, badge numbers, and evidence markers. Authority was becoming paperwork again. Camille sat down and rested both hands on the cool surface. Her body had begun to register what her mind had postponed, the tightness across her shoulders, the dryness in her throat, and the slow ache behind her eyes. She had known the assignment carried risk, but she had expected skepticism expressed through procedure. She had not expected her identification to be dismissed before it was read, or the sealed order to be torn because the men holding it could not imagine that a black woman in an ordinary coat had arrived with lawful authority. Through the one-way glass, she could see Harlan seated near the communications desk without his access card. Keller stood several feet away, watching a marshal photograph his hands and record which pages he had touched. Ethan remained near the evidence corridor, answering questions into his active body camera. He looked younger now that he was no longer trying to imitate Harlan's certainty. Camille turned toward the camera above the interview room. Its indicator was still dark. She did not know whether the system had failed, been disabled, or was recording without a visible light. She spoke anyway. My name is Dr. Camille Denise Brooks. I entered North Harbor Police Station at 6:38 in the evening. I presented federal identification and requested the evidence custodian. The sealed court instrument was intact when placed on the intake counter. Her voice did not tremble. At 6:42, Officer Brent Keller broke the seal after Sergeant Paul Harlan declined verification. 2 pages and multiple fragments separated from the envelope. One fragment fell beside the keyboard. One fell near Officer Ethan Cole. The station's visible camera indicators were inactive. She paused and listened to the rain. Years earlier, her first supervisor had taught her that evidence did not need to shout. It only needed to survive. At the time, Camille thought he meant photographs, receipts, and digital files. Now she understood that survival sometimes depended on a person remaining calm while everyone around her tried to redefine what had happened. After the seal was broken, she continued, Sergeant Harlan attempted to obtain my phone, directed officers to place me in this room, and ordered material cleared before inspection. A shredder was activated in the evidence corridor. Officer Cole preserved a warrant fragment and later activated his body camera. She stopped again. Beyond the glass, Harlan looked toward her as if he could hear every word. Perhaps he could. Perhaps that was why his face had become still. Ruiz entered the doorway but did not interrupt. She waited until Camille finished, then placed a paper cup of water on the table. The room camera was disabled at 5:51, Ruiz said. Your statement was captured by Officer Cole's body camera from the hallway. Camille looked through the open door. Ethan stood with his shoulders squared, the red light still glowing on his chest. He had positioned himself there deliberately. Not close enough to intrude. Close enough to preserve the truth. Camille lifted the water but did not drink yet. How much was destroyed? She asked. We do not know, Ruiz said. The machine has been sealed. Specialists will recover what they can. The card held at least one transfer record listed as missing. We photographed it before anything moved. Camille nodded. Relief did not arrive as warmth. It arrived as the absence of another loss. Ruiz glanced toward the lobby. Captain Crane wants to apologize. Later. That is what I told her. Camille finally drank. The water tasted faintly of paper and plastic, but it eased the dryness in her throat. Outside, a marshal announced that the station server image had begun. A printer stopped. A door lock released. Then silence returned. Camille looked at Ethan through the glass. He had spent too long obeying the wrong man, but when the record needed a witness, he had chosen to become one. She turned back toward the dark camera and added one final sentence. The truth was visible from the moment I arrived. The only question was who believed I was worth listening to before federal badges entered the room. Ruiz entered the lobby carrying the restored verification copy while two federal technicians worked at the communications desk. The rain had weakened to a soft tapping against the front windows, but the station remained sealed. Every exterior door was monitored, every workstation had been disconnected, and every officer was required to remain where the marshals could see them. Harlan sat beneath the dark lobby camera with his access card sealed inside an evidence pouch. Keller stood near the intake counter, staring at the torn warrant as specialists arranged its fragments beneath clear protective sheets. Camille stepped out of room 2 and stopped beside Ruiz. The deputy marshal placed the verification copy on an empty desk, smoothing it beneath the white overhead light. "Captain Crane," she said, "you should hear this with your officers present." Crane moved closer. Ethan remained near the interview hallway, his body camera still recording. Ruiz read the first section slowly. The order authorized federal agents to secure North Harbor Police Station, isolate its evidence systems, examine storage rooms, and preserve all records connected to suspected evidence tampering. The second section named every employee with administrative access during the previous 18 months. Harlan's name appeared first. Keller's appeared 4 lines below it. Harlan leaned forward. "An access list does not prove wrongdoing." "No," Ruiz said. "That is why investigators collect evidence instead of destroying it." She turned the page. The order also required immediate preservation of the lobby cameras, intake records, internal messages, shredder contents, and any document handled after federal notification. The torn seal had not merely alerted the marshals. It had activated the exact preservation conditions Harlan had spent the past hour violating. Keller looked toward Camille. "You knew the station was named before you walked in?" "Yes." "Why did you not tell us?" Camille held his gaze. "I presented the sealed order and asked you to verify my identification. I told you not to damage the document. I told you every decision afterward would become evidence. You could have said we were the target. The order was sealed because investigators needed to see whether this station would follow lawful procedure without advance warning." Harlan rose halfway from his chair before a marshal calmly directed him to remain seated. "So she was testing us?" Camille's expression did not change. "No. I was delivering a legal opportunity to cooperate." Ruiz opened a secure report on her tablet. The technicians had recovered the station's camera control log. The lobby cameras had not failed. They had been disabled manually at 5:51 that evening using Harlan's credentials, 47 minutes before Camille arrived. Another log showed Keller accessing the evidence database at 6:29, even though he had no assigned evidence duties that night. Crane read the time stamps twice. "Why were you inside the system?" she asked. Keller looked toward Harlan before answering. "He told me to review duplicate entries." "Which entries?" Keller remained silent. Ruiz displayed a list of 17 case numbers. Camille recognized them immediately. Each belonged to a file with missing video, altered transfer data, or unverified storage access. 12 involved black defendants. 5 involved complaints against North Harbor officers. Harlan's voice became quieter. "Administrative errors are not federal crimes." Camille looked toward the evidence corridor, where the shredder now sat sealed beneath a transparent cover. "Errors do not usually disable cameras before a court order arrives." Ethan lowered his eyes, then stepped forward. "There is something else." Harlan turned toward him. "Do not speculate." "I am not speculating." Ethan removed a small notebook from his shirt pocket and handed it to Ruiz. For 6 months, he had written down dates when evidence appeared outside assigned storage, when Harlan entered the vault after hours, and when Keller replaced barcode labels without a second witness. He had never filed a formal report because Harlan warned him that accusing senior officers would end his career. Ruiz examined the pages. "Why bring this forward now?" Ethan looked at Camille, then at the red light on his camera. Because tonight I watched them decide she was lying before they read one word she carried. The station fell silent. Harlan no longer looked angry. He looked exposed. Ruiz placed Ethan's notebook into an evidence sleeve and turned to the marshals at the doors. The search authority is confirmed. Begin the full station lockdown. Metal locks engaged throughout the building, one after another, until the final sound came from the evidence room. Camille watched Harlan listen to each click. Only then did he understand the truth written inside the warrant he had allowed to be torn. The black woman he dismissed had not entered his station asking for power. She had entered carrying proof that his power was already under review. The lockdown continued through the night as federal teams copied servers, photographed storage shelves, and sealed every access terminal connected to the evidence division. Camille remained near the lobby because Ruiz needed her to identify the case numbers from the audit. She watched technicians match altered records with missing videos and unexplained transfers. Each confirmed discrepancy gave weight to people who had once been told their complaints were incomplete, mistaken, or too late. Harlan sat apart from the others while a federal investigator recorded his statement. Keller waited near the intake desk, his uniform suddenly looking less like authority and more like clothing he could no longer hide behind. When Ruiz asked Ethan to provide a formal account, Harlan called him over before the interview began. "You know what this will do to the unit," he said quietly. Ethan stopped several feet away. "I know what silence already did." Harlan lowered his voice further. "Tell them Brooks tore the envelope when Keller tried to inspect it. Say the seal was damaged before she entered." Camille heard every word, but she did not interrupt. Ethan looked toward the broken warrant beneath the protective sheets, then at his body camera. "The seal was intact," he said. "I watched him tear it." Harlan's expression tightened. "You owe loyalty to the people who trained you." Ethan shook his head. "You trained me to protect the record. I should have done it sooner." Ruiz approached and asked whether anyone had attempted to influence his statement. Ethan answered yes. Harlan closed his eyes for one brief second, as if the final door had locked inside him. The investigators separated them immediately. Later, Ethan found Camille standing beside a window while the rainwater slid down the glass in thin silver lines. "I am sorry," he said. "For tonight. For every time I noticed something and convinced myself it was not enough." Camille studied him carefully. He looked exhausted, but no longer uncertain. "Tell the whole truth," she said. "Not only the part that makes you brave now. Tell them how long you stayed silent and why." Ethan nodded. "I will. That is where accountability begins." Across the lobby, Captain Crane approached with her hands empty. "Dr. Brooks, I owe you an apology." Camille turned toward her. Crane continued, "You presented valid identification. You followed procedure. My officers treated you as a threat before verifying anything." "They did more than misread a document," Camille said. "They decided what kind of woman I was before they read my name." Crane lowered her eyes. "You are right. The next black woman who walks through these doors may not have federal marshals waiting outside. She may have only a complaint, a receipt, or a frightened child beside her. Your apology matters only if the station listens before power arrives to force it." Crane accepted the words without defending herself. Ruiz later confirmed that the shredder specialists had recovered several intact sections and enough fragments to reconstruct the missing transfer forms. The station server revealed deleted camera files stored in a temporary backup directory. Keller's access history connected him to altered barcodes, while Harlan's credentials appeared repeatedly in after-hours entries. Both men were relieved of duty pending formal proceedings, and their access to police systems was revoked. Camille did not celebrate. She asked Ruiz to preserve every recovered record and notify the attorneys connected to affected cases. "People deserve to know their evidence was compromised," she said. "Even when the truth creates more work." Near dawn, the torn warrant had been reconstructed beneath clear archival film. The federal seal could not be made whole, but every damaged edge was visible. Ruiz placed it inside a numbered evidence case and asked Camille to verify the fragments. Camille leaned over the table, counted each piece, and signed the chain of custody. Ethan signed beneath her as the witnessing officer. For the first time that night, no one questioned whether her signature belonged there. 6 months later, morning sunlight entered the rebuilt evidence room at North Harbor Police Station through a narrow row of windows that had once been covered by gray blinds. The room no longer belonged to a single supervisor. 2 employees were required for every transfer, every access card was individually tracked, and an independent review system sent copies of each transaction beyond the station's control. Camille stood beside the new intake terminal while Captain Judith Crane explained the final changes to a small group of attorneys, community representatives, and officers. 73 cases had been reopened after investigators discovered missing recordings, altered transfer logs, or evidence that had been stored under false numbers. Several people whose complaints had once been dismissed were finally given formal hearings. Others received written notice that the records used in their cases could no longer be trusted. The truth did not repair every loss, but it ended the silence that had protected the damage. Paul Harlan and Brent Keller had been charged with obstruction, records tampering, and conspiracy related to the evidence system. Their cases remained before the court, and Camille refused every invitation to predict the outcome. Accountability, she reminded reporters, was not the same as revenge. It meant preserving the facts long enough for justice to examine them honestly. Ethan Cole had testified before the Federal Review Panel and admitted that he had noticed irregularities months before Camille arrived. He did not describe himself as a hero. He told the panel that fear of losing his career had made silence feel reasonable until he watched his supervisors dismiss a black woman before reading her credentials. He remained with the department under outside supervision, helping auditors identify old access patterns and training younger officers to document concerns without seeking permission from the people being questioned. When the ceremony ended, he approached Camille near the storage shelves. "The first transfer under the new system is ready," he said. A young evidence technician stood at the scanner holding a sealed envelope. She looked nervous as she checked the serial number, then asked Camille, "How do we know the system is honest now?" Camille looked around the room. 2 cameras recorded from different angles. The technician's access card was logged. Ethan stood as the required witness. A copy of the transaction would be sent automatically to an independent server. "We do not know because someone promises it," Camille said. "We know because no one person can erase the truth." The technician placed the envelope beneath the scanner. A soft electronic tone sounded, but the screen remained amber. She checked the form and noticed that the witness signature was missing. Ethan signed his name. The technician scanned it again. This time, the light turned green. Camille watched the sealed envelope move into a clear storage container without a single hand touching the stamped edge. Captain Crane stood at the doorway, silent. Months earlier, that doorway had represented a system protecting itself. Now it remained open while community observers examined the room. Camille thought of the night she had stood at the intake counter with rain on her coat and a lawful document in her hands. Harlan had believed kindness meant weakness because she had not shouted. Keller had mistaken restraint for uncertainty because she had not fought for the envelope. They had never understood that her calmness was not surrender. It was discipline. She had given them every opportunity to stop, verify, and choose the truth before federal authority arrived. Their prejudice had made them believe that dignity could not carry power unless it wore a badge. Camille signed the final audit report and returned the pen to the technician. No applause followed. None was needed. The scanner gave one final quiet tone, the container locked, and the green light remained steady above it. The broken seal from that rainy night was now preserved in a federal evidence archive, but the lesson it carried remained inside the station. Justice becomes fragile whenever people decide who deserves to be believed before they examine the facts. As Camille walked toward the open door, she looked back once at the young technician, Ethan, and the untouched envelope. Then she stepped into the sunlight. If you had been standing in that lobby before the marshals arrived, would you have trusted the uniform, followed the crowd, or been the first person willing to listen to the woman everyone else had already judged?